Hi, Roy here on my channel Roy Reads Anything, which is talking about old books and such like things. And this year I'm a co-host on Garb August, the month of reading trashy literature, a reading event devised by CriminOlly, lots of other fabulous co-hosts, and a whole playlist of Garb August videos that you can watch. I've linked to down below. And just jump in, I've donned the ceremonial Garb August things to just have a little bit of a discussion about what is trash and particularly why trash is good, and finishing up with an example of classic trash. Not something that's classically trashy, but a classic that is could be defined as being trash, because Garb August happens and it's an enjoyable time of reading kind of low stakes literature. But at some point, no matter how many times it's said, it's not about saying bad, it's not about the literature being poor quality, it's other factors. It nevertheless, for some reason, calling books trashy or garbage somehow implies that they're not very good. And that can be a bit annoying when it's like, they're my favourite books. How can that be trashy? So just some thoughts. I mean, one thing, a personal view, I'm sort of working on a thought about the what is trash thing. I think, well, first and foremost, it's about fun. I mean, this isn't, no one's writing their PhD thesis to sort of nail forevermore a definition of trashy literature.
At least not yet.
It's a fun read. Yeah, I might have accidentally written one in the margins. To me, it depends on your starting point. So I think it's about reading something for fun. I'm gonna say for fun every 5 minutes. Reading something that is more lurid and sensational than you would normally read. Okay, bit more of that going on. Something that's more overtly commercialized, more of a product type of book, and more obviously derivative, just more along the spectrum, because these can't be absolute statements, because all books are produced for commercial reasons. So you quickly end up with yeah, everything's trashy. So no, I think it's about something that's just got more of that, more lurid, more commercial, less literary, highbrow, classy than you would normally read, because it's relative. So for example, say you normally read intellectual science fiction books, sort of high-end science fiction. Reading something like an Edgar Rice Burroughs interplanetary adventure novel, although that's technically science fiction, would be moving out of your normal base into something that's a bit more, you could say a bit more trashy. Someone who normally reads Edgar Rice Burroughs and would probably be appalled at the idea of Burroughs being defined as trashy, say reading some of the copies of Burroughs, a sort of a John Norman Gore book, or Alan Burt Akers, or the Richard Blade series, would be moving in that direction to stuff that's more sort of derivative, and it's got more of those kind of cash in type qualities, and yet it's offering you an entertaining time, and it can be well crafted and fun and all the rest of it. So that's my sort of trash definition for today. It's more like that than what you normally read. So you can't have an absolute this is and this isn't, because it depends what your starting point is. So my 5 reasons why trash is good. Starting with number 1, storytelling. Okay, so nobody's saying let's read some lousy books. We're saying let's read some good books. Part of the thing they're going to do well is the page turning aspect. So storytelling, you're engaged with it, you want to see what happens, no matter how ridiculous, no matter how perhaps cliched or whatever it is. Nevertheless, it's well written and enjoyable in that sort of storytelling, page-turning way. And that's where, I could sort of see why maybe authors might not be queuing up to say, please include my book in Garb August. I want you to call it trashy and garbage. But it's the craft personship involved in producing, particularly thinking of pulp novels when people were writing stuff in like 3 weeks or whatever, the quick turnaround to nail all those points and produce something that's really exciting is great. So one point is storytelling. Number 2 is we're talking easy reading, brain candy type stuff. Yeah, we're talking no great demands being put on you as a reader. So it's not about figuring out what the authors mean or relating it to your, being super challenged in what your own life's all about, relating it to, where does this piece of literature fit with lots of other literature? Probably not any of that. It's purely there done to satisfy you as the reader, which, that might not be the most laudable literary aim ever. On the other hand, life is sad and difficult, so why not for a moment have some time when you can simply enjoy stuff that's being put out there for your enjoyment. But doesn't necessarily mean it's got no connection to the world of higher forms of literature. So I'll give you an example. One of my favourite books is a book by Philip Jose Farmer called Doc Savage, His Apocalyptic Life. So this is a biography of a fictional character, that being Doc Savage, hero of 170 something pulp adventures that came out in magazines in the 30s and then reprinted in paperbacks in the 60s and so on and so on. So a pulp character, easy to see, again taking my, what do you normally read, but you could see this as being sort of in that trashy, enjoyable, disposable end of things. So in this Doc Savage book by Farmer, he does lots of things, but one thing in the introduction, he relates this pulp saga to some works that you would see as being higher literary things. So he relates it to the work of Henry Miller, work of William Burroughs. There's a bit of a side stab towards William Blake as well. So
really?
This sort of material, so it's kind of like, well, partly, what do you bring to it? What do you choose to get out of it? So you could, like Farmer, read a load of old pulp magazines and see them as being a form of apocalyptic fiction, hence the title of his book. He also indicates Doc Savage as being a blood relation of Leopold Bloom from James Joyce's Ulysses, but that's a bit of a different point. So, yes, easy reading. Number 3, having said all of that, social comment and insight. So, particularly if you're reading older stuff that comes into this sort of super popular mass-produced fiction kind of world, you're getting a bit like listening to pop songs of the time. You're getting a sort of insight into what people were worried about, what people were excited about in a moment in history, in a really vivid and direct way, because the authors of, say, books about skinheads or the paperbacks from hell horror books, they weren't sitting down to write sociological treatises. They might, like James Herbert does in his books, I now know from having read one, put in some social comment ideas of their own, or they might be sort of accidentally social comment just because they're artifacts of the time. And something about stuff that's written for entertainment, maybe written at breakneck speed, it's surfacing, it's almost like mainlining the subconscious of society at that time. So there's that going on. I think Philip K. Dick says something about the trash stratum being where things emerge. Point number 4, joining in the fun. Joining in the fun. So one of the other co-hosts, Celeste, Bookbound Weirdo, said something in her God of August intro video about the it being works that are, it's in on its own joke, which I thought was a brilliant description of the kind of stuff we're talking about. So there's a sort of there's a sort of pact being made between the author and you as the reader, in terms of we know people like books about killer sharks. Here's a book about a killer shark, and like we're going to make it really like the ultimate killer shark book that you've ever read. So I think there's that kind of enjoyment of being part of a sort of reading community. So it's not just you and the author, it's other people who read stuff like that. And then of course some of the books we're talking about, they're novelisations, so again you've got the wider world of what the story's been adapted from and all that kind of stuff. So it's being in on the joke. And point 5, it's about getting a fuller picture of the world of reading. You know, we're alive at a particular moment when we're lucky in that there's lots of books. They're very accessible. Wasn't always the case. Wasn't always the case that reading was thought of as being a good thing. You know, I've read sort of historical accounts when people like MPs and stuff would argue against public libraries, for instance, on the basis that people, and they often actually meant women, would be getting hold of novels and they'd be reading these novels and not doing their things they should be doing, like housework. So we're at a time when you can read lots and lots. So why not see, just out of curiosity, what's going on in big fat airport novels or series of books with 50 entries in them and explosions on the cover, for example. So yes, that's what I wanted to say. 5 reasons why I think trash is good. I promised an example of some trash from the classic era. So taking sensation fiction of the 1860s, such as Wilkie Collins' Woman in White. So it says classic on the front of this one. Even the comic book version says classic. Okay, so let's agree it's a classic. Originally serialized in a magazine, cliffhangers every episode. People, you know, it formed a craze. People are hanging on to, like, got to find out what's happening in the next Woman in White episode. They'd be queuing up outside the publishers' offices to get the latest one, you know, so it's causing this sort of mania. Full of crazy sensational things. I'll put in a cartoon from the time. So Punch had a cartoon about sensation fiction that was pretty sort of, that's how it was being satirized, this kind of people reading these episodic books when all sorts of crazy things happened in them. So a Punch cartoon about the phenomenon of the sensation novel. The caption reads, Clara, yes dear, I've got the last one down and it's perfectly delicious. A man marries his grandmother. 14 persons are poisoned by a young and beautiful girl. Forgeries by the dozen. Robberies, hangings. In fact, full of delightful horrors. So all those things are played on and played on and played on, and it's like, what's going to happen next? So all of this was doing those kind of things. Doesn't say anything bad about the quality of the book, which is an acknowledged classic. Hope I've made that point in a reasonably good way. Plus, it's really good as well and a really fun read. And just to finish with a quote from Meg Mortimer from the soap opera Crossroads, as novelised sort of into a cookbook. It's a tie-in, not a novelisation, I know that. So I'll give you three points. Use evaporated milk instead of fresh when making soups and sauces. The consistency is creamier. To cut bread really thin for dainty sandwiches, always warm the knife first. Meg Mortimer's hot knife. This gives a sharp, clean and very thin slice. Never wash an omelette pan. Rub it with some kitchen paper after use, and this will ensure that future omelettes never stick. Okay,
That's
back
lies,
soon with
that
something
is.
else.
Lies.
It probably is. I think
Please,
it's
I'll
put
try.
about by the omelette
Marketing
industrial
board.
complex.